Welcome to today's lesson, and today we're continuing to think about Easter. Now, we're going to be talking about a new character today, someone called Peter. Now, you might have heard of him. In fact, why don't you have a little think and tell me all the things that you know about Simon Peter? There's lots that we find out about him. In fact, he was a fisherman, and Jesus called him to come and follow him after an incredible catch of fish. He couldn't catch anything one night, but when Jesus came to the beach, he told Peter to throw his net over one side, and there were hundreds and hundreds of fish that were caught. And so Peter decided that he was going to leave everything and follow Jesus. And Peter became one of the closest friends of Jesus. In fact, there were a group of three of them that were really close, almost like best friends, you'd call it. And Peter was one of them. He got to see Jesus and be with him when so many miracles and teachings were happening, some that other people didn't get to see at all. And today we're going to think about that incredible relationship between the two of them. So I've got a question for you. I want to think about some of your closest friends. Who is it that you love to spend time with? What is it about them that you most enjoy? Have a little think and chat to the people around you. Now, we have some incredible friends, don't we, that we get to share life with. We get to share time at school together. We get to share playtime. It might be that they're friends outside of school, in a club, or something that you like to do with your friends when you go on holiday. There are so many close friends that we have. But sometimes those friendships break, don't they? There are things that happen, a bit like a rocky road, when we're going along really well as really good friends, and then something happens that breaks us apart. And working together as good friends, well, that takes effort, doesn't it? To mend friendships, to make them good again. And we can't just leave them when they break, otherwise we lose our friends completely. We have to work at getting close together. And so Peter is someone that we're going to look really closely at today. So listen to our story and listen to Peter and his friendship with Jesus. Now, Jesus had been arrested. He'd been taken by guards to the house of Caiaphas, the high priest, and he was there in amongst the room. And outside of the room was a courtyard with a fireplace. And all the friends of Jesus had run away, had disappeared, and left Jesus all alone with the guards. But not Peter. Peter had snuck along behind. He had seen where the guards had taken Jesus and had crept along and was standing right there in the courtyard by the fireplace, warming himself. And he could see through the window opening that Jesus was inside. Now the guards and the people around Jesus tried to get him in trouble, tried to find out what he'd done wrong. And they were doing terrible things like mocking him and teasing him and making fun of Jesus. And Peter could see what was happening. As Peter stood in the courtyard, one of the servant girls turned round and looked at him. She looked at his clothing and looked at the face. "You're one of his friends, aren't you?" she said, accusing Peter of being close to Jesus. "Oh, no, I don't know what you mean. No, I've never seen him," replied Peter. Then another servant girl came out and looked at Peter. "You're one of them. You're one of the friends of Jesus, the man who's arrested." "Look, I don't know what it is you're saying. I don't know that man at all," he said. But as he spoke, the men there too pricked up their ears. "You sound like one of Jesus' friends. Your accent gives you away. You are a friend of Jesus." "I swear to you, may God deal with me, may it be ever so severely if I'm not telling you the truth. I do not know that man." And as soon as he said it, a cockerel cried out, piercing the night sky. And in that moment, Peter remembered Jesus' words just hours before at the meal. Peter, before the cockerel crows twice, you have denied me 3 times and say that you do not know me. And as soon as Peter realised that Jesus knew what had happened, he looked towards the window and Jesus looked towards him. And he was filled with anguish and despair. His heart was filled with sadness, and he ran out of that courtyard and wept and wept and wept. Now I wonder if you heard in our story there what happened. This was Peter. This was the great friend of Jesus who had been everywhere with him, even when other friends of Jesus hadn't gone into upper rooms and seen secret miracles. Peter had been there. He was one of the closest, best friends of Jesus. And yet here he was, standing in that courtyard, pretending that he didn't know who Jesus was, claiming that God could strike him down if he were lying, swearing to the truth that he didn't know the Lord. And then in that moment of the cockerel crowing, he realised that he had done the exact thing that he claimed he would never do, and he'd let Jesus down. Now, I don't know how you would feel in that situation. How would you feel to know that you'd let your friend down so badly? Maybe you have felt like that. Maybe you have felt like you've let someone down, or maybe someone else has let you down. There's a great sadness and a sorrow to that feeling. But the incredible thing is that with this story, it continues, it goes on. In fact, we know when we look at the Easter story as the whole big picture, we know that after Jesus had died and risen again, what he had spoken to Peter, and they had been forgiven, the friendship had been healed, it had been mended. So much so that Peter, on another occasion, he stood up in front of thousands of people. Can you imagine that for a moment? Standing up in front of thousands. And he claimed and he preached and he taught and he told everyone how he was a friend of Jesus, how Jesus had died and how everyone had seen him die. Yet he had seen Jesus risen again. He wasn't fearful. He wasn't scared. He wasn't worried that he'd be arrested like he had been back in that courtyard. In fact, he'd completely turned his life around. He was now standing and claiming to be Jesus' friend in front of everyone, even knowing that Jesus had been killed and even knowing that he put his life in danger. What a turnaround! What a difference! Peter had gone from being really scared in that courtyard, worried that he'd be caught, worried that he'd be arrested, to standing up in front of everyone proclaiming that he was one of Jesus' followers. That is restoration. That is a friendship that's been restored, made good and mended. And the big story of Easter, Christians see how that is a story of restoration, not just between Jesus and Peter and them being restored. But the Christian belief of the story of Easter is that Jesus restores everyone, that everyone who's messed up can be back to being friends with him. So restoration is a really big part of the Easter story. But so is reconciliation. It's a really long word, but it means to put right. It means to reconcile yourself, to put yourself right with each other. And that's exactly what Peter did with Jesus. He went from being someone who was scared to say he knew him, to someone who was so brave and courageous, telling everyone that he knew about Jesus. That is reconciliation. So we have got these incredible big pictures of Easter, the whole story of Easter being shown in this tiny story that we have zoomed in on today. So I wonder what it's like to be Peter, what it was like to be Peter in that courtyard, and what it's like to be Peter now at the end of our story when we're looking at him preaching to so many. In fact, on that day when he preached to so many, 3,000 people became followers of Jesus. What an incredible topsy-turvy story. And not only that, we get to zoom out even further and see in the great big Easter story that this pattern of Peter being made friends with Jesus is a smaller version of the bigger picture that Christians believe that everyone's made friends with Jesus through being forgiven, reconciled, and restored. In the courtyard. Chat. Imagine that you are Peter in the courtyard and that you are being accused of knowing Jesus. Discuss the thoughts, feelings, and reasons why you denied knowing him. Imagine that the cockerel has just crowed. How do you feel now? Turn around. Peter changed from being too scared to say he knew Jesus to standing up in front of a crowd of thousands. What brought about this change? How can forgiving a friend make friendship stronger? Think about your own friendships. How can you make them stronger? Peter poem. Write your own poem as if you were Peter. You can choose a small part of the story, for example in the courtyard, or his whole story. The choice is yours.